Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I had a subscriber ask a really interesting question. So I'm going to put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, do a little crafting, try to scale my weaponsmithing up, and answer this question for you guys, because he basically asked, are diabetics, because they have to inject insulin, are they at a higher risk of cancer because of the connection between insulin levels and cancer? You know, and that's one heck of a question. The thing that we need to consider there, I've proven before with the other stuff and broke down to people that type 2 diabetics usually do go on insulin, so it's not a type 1 diabetic thing. We've kind of covered that in the past. Had to cover that after some people argued with it who weren't aware of that fact, and had a couple medical doctors come in and actually back what I was saying. At least one medical doctor who regularly was prescribing insulin for his type 2 diabetic patients, so that helped a lot. Plus, obviously, all the stuff from the ADA and everything else, the American Diabetic Association. So it is a type 2 problem also. Actually, more type 2 diabetics go on insulin than type 1 total, just because there's way more of them. So, is there a connection? Yes, but we need to understand it a little better. It's not the fact that they're injecting insulin that is the problem. It's the fact that it's about total circulating insulin that is the big problem with cancer, because we know that just like with IGF-1, cancer cells, most tumor cells, feed on insulin. They're extremely insulin sensitive tissue, so that means they just kind of suck all the insulin in. They're greedy with it. They just suck it up like a pig. The best way to think of it, different tissues in your body have different things they absorb out of your bloodstream based upon their sensitivity. Now, muscle tissue tends to be really insulin sensitive if it's trained and you have enough of it. So it's fantastic at kind of sucking up that insulin also. So is your liver. But cancerous tumors tend to be extremely insulin sensitive, more so than most other tissues. So for every ounce or gram of them that are in there, they're going to get a disproportionate amount just because they're more sensitive to it. So they attract it a little better, meaning, or they absorb more of it as it comes past them, is the best way to describe it. So circulating insulin levels when you have some tumor started can become a problem, because again, everyone gets cancer, and that's something that people need to understand. We all get little cancerous tumors at one time or another through our life. It's perfectly normal. That's actually normal. It's not abnormal. Most of us get more than one of them through our lives. Some people might get a lot of them, but your body usually fights it off before it grows big enough to really be detectable or noticeable. Your body fights it. It disposes of it. However, if it grows faster than your body can deal with it, of course it becomes a cancerous tumor, a malignant tumor. And that's a terrible thing. I mean, I think everyone understands that at this point. Cancer sucks. Cancer's awful. And what happens there is that the more insulin you have circulating in your bloodstream, the faster your tumors have a chance to grow. So that's a bad thing. The thing is, controlling insulin is actually not as much about diet as some people think, because virtually anything that you eat to some extent requires a certain amount of insulin to be produced by your body to handle it and transport it into cells. So it's really just your transport hormone. Insulin is not a bad thing. Without insulin, you're dead. You're dead within minutes or seconds even. Without insulin in your body, you need it to survive. It's a fantastic thing. But like with many other things, too much of it's a bad thing. So what basically happens, any given amount of food that you eat or what's circulating through your bloodstream, all the glucose and amino acids and everything else circulating through your bloodstream, requires insulin to bring the levels down, because it transports it into cells to bring the levels down into check. And obviously it's coming out of your GI tract, what you're eating, and it's getting all in there, and then the insulin deals with it. Well, the problem becomes if you become insulin insensitive, or the less insulin sensitivity you have throughout your whole body, the higher your insulin levels are going to have to be to transport all of that stuff floating in your bloodstream, blood glucose and blood sugar, into your various cells. Now, obviously, things like tumors are extremely insulin sensitive, but a lot of people develop insulin resistance. And when you develop insulin resistance, you're well on your way to becoming a type 2 diabetic at that point. So the problem is not that they use insulin, because they would be producing insulin to deal with the same amount of food even if they weren't a diabetic. It's the fact that they're insulin resistant. That's the problem. So the amount of insulin they're having to inject is going to be higher than a healthy person who isn't insulin resistant. Someone who has a higher insulin sensitivity, who is athletic and works out and trains and is fit, is going to need less insulin to transport all that food. Well, again, the lower insulin, because most of the cells through their body have a higher sensitivity, particularly muscle tissue, means there's less insulin there. So therefore, calorie per calorie, which you're ingesting, less of it's going to be able to go to tumors. Less of it's going to be able to go to things like that, problematic things like, again, tumors. It can go to your muscle tissue. It can be burned for fuel. It can help build muscle. It can be stored in muscles for future use for performance. So being insulin resistant is actually where the connection is, because you need more insulin. It's the same thing for someone who isn't diabetic yet, who's still producing plenty of insulin just fine. Well, once they start becoming insulin resistant, they overproduce. So they're not taking insulin, but they're at just as much risk as the diabetic. So there is absolutely a connection between type 2 diabetes and cancer, just like there is with insulin resistance and cancer, because more circulating insulin equals more tumors. What can you do about it? Well, a couple things. Best thing you can do about it is to lower your body fat levels. Be it a healthy body fat is the best thing you can do. Number 2, resistance training. Weight training, resistance training of any type has an enormous positive impact on insulin sensitivity and diabetes. In fact, people who lift weights regularly are 80% less likely to develop type 2 diabetes than someone who doesn't. That is a well-known fact. Now, there can be some correlational things going on there, because people who lift weights tend to eat better. But still, the fact of the matter is 80%. Your diet can play a big role as well. It's not so much just about calories, because calories in, calories out is going to determine how fat you get, but things like slowing your glycemic load. Basically, what am I trying to say here? Basically, high fiber foods are going to be a good idea. A very, very high fiber diet tends to slow down absorption rates of all of the various foods that you eat. It makes it more manageable. You need smaller insulin spikes over time to deal with transporting that, because you're getting a slower trickle into your bloodstream from your digestive system. So high fiber diets tend to help. Keeping saturated fat moderate, keeping it within reason is a big one too, because there is some data that has emerged over the years suggesting that excessive saturated fat intake can actually increase insulin resistance on its own. That's a big point of argument and contention, but in light of that, it wouldn't be a bad idea to limit saturated fat intake. Don't go overboard with it. You know, I think, who is it? When I was in the UK, the NHS, their dietitians there recommended that for, I think it was men, not to go over 30 grams of saturated fat a day, and for women to not go over either 20 or 25. So that's not a bad guideline there, just because of that. So keeping saturated fat in check, a high fiber diet, weightlifting and resistance training, and not allowing yourself to get too fat. That is the best thing you can do to help here, because every single factor like that seems to contribute to diabetes, type 2 diabetes rates, also contributes to cancer, meaning there is a massive overlapping correlation. So generally, anything that reduces your chances of developing diabetes, and all those things do, also seems to lower cancer rates in people. And I mean, all things being considered, making a few little sacrifices in life, such as getting to the gym and working out a bit, and at least trying to eat a decent balanced diet with plenty of fiber in it and whole foods in it, is a pretty small trade-off to dramatically reduce your chance of getting type 2 diabetes, because type 2 diabetes sucks. And we know that just the weight training alone cuts cancer rates by 50%. So to cut your rate of cancer in half and your diabetes rate by 80%, two diseases that it really sucks if you get either one, and it's even worse if you get both, is totally worth it. I mean, there's small sacrifices to make to not have to deal with that sort of enormous negative quality of life impact. So this is really a no-brainer, and honestly, it's just scary to think that you can tell people this and show them the data on this, and they still don't want to bother getting to a gym and eating a little more fiber and some vegetables every now and then. That's what's scary about it, and the truth is, those little things there, those little minor lifestyle changes. You don't even have to be a health nut in any way. You don't have to be someone who's obsessed with their diet or training to get those benefits. You just need to clean things up a little bit and have just a little bit of discipline and a little bit of regimen. And you can dramatically cut your chances of developing these diseases. It's just such a small sacrifice to make for what you get out of it. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.